of the individuals and communities and institutions, of course, to often play together to reach a higher common goal. And education, of course, I believe is one of the success stories of this, of many small island states. How do I see UCSIS playing a role in all of this? It is for sure by a series of initiatives. I believe that, for example, joint degrees, or perhaps more achievable in the shorter term, summer schools, joint courses, training, exchange of students and staff among small island states can increase, can support even more the already ongoing creation of knowledge and research on the ground by, for example, exchanging best practice that are already supporting and changing some of the policies on the ground. So UCSIS, I think, has a role to support this and perhaps even act as a multiplier. Now, of course, we need to mobilize some resources for this because they don't grow on trees, unfortunately. But I believe, and I close here, that if we manage to mobilize some of the small island states' constituencies, including involving the success stories and the diplomacy like EUSIS, and we reach out to small island states embassies and the people who are working already on it, there could be a joint action that can create good synergies with other institutions who are already probably already eager or know about this consortium. I'm talking about the traditional regional organizations like CARICOM, Silicon Forum, or OECS, or including the EU, that perhaps can support the ongoing initiative if we manage to, of course, and when we will manage to produce this plan that can be discussed also with just these large partners. So to finish, in a nutshell, I believe that there is a lot of potential for UCSIS to support the already good things that we are doing individually, but coming together can provide even a better platform for these actions to be shared and be more effective at the local and the regional and global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Moncada. I think I enjoyed very much this optimistic perspective. Maybe you are going to say, well, it's not optimistic, it's rather realistic, but I really like the spirit that flew with your words. I think that one of the very important points is that there is already a lot happening, particularly when it comes to knowledge creation. And I take your point about the potential that the revival of UCSIS may have in terms of providing a better platform, for enhancing and strengthening things that are already happening and that could be expanded to other areas, just continuing in terms of joint degrees, exchanges of people, but also of practices. I think that it was very, very useful. Now, Professor Moncada, thank you very much for this. Now we will go back in this case to the original order, so to say, and I'm going to give the floor to our friend Sai Navoti. Sai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. And professors, colleagues, good morning to you and good morning to all our audience. It is indeed a pleasure for me this morning here in New York, UN headquarters, to greet you all. And first of all, let me thank UNESCO for the invitation. I'm particularly happy to be here this morning and to hear what was said in the introduction, that it's been 12 years since this conversation was last made. And in my mind, that confirmed what we had suspected all along in 2018, that the university consortium needed to be revisited and revitalized. And I'm really happy that with such a confirmation, we are having this conversation today. And what fortified me more is to see here on the panel with me, the institutions who have been really the backbone of the university consortium since its inception, with the absence, of course, of Mauritius, I think. Glad to see that Professor Holland here representing the University of South Pacific, Dr. Smith representing the University of the West Indies, and of course our old friend Mota, who has left us because of the status of their political status and the fact that they are quite developed ahead of most of the small island developing states. But Stefano has always been very supportive of things islands and things developing states. Of course, Kalim, he's one of us who is an islander himself, but working in one of these major universities in the United States, member of the diaspora, and has dedicated his time to talk to us. I'm looking at the question that you had asked us to talk to this morning. And I must admit that I am not a person that exists in the academic world, though I'm a beneficiary of it from some of the people that I'm looking at. But to know the intricacies of how things are worked and how things functions in that sphere, although I know the important role of the higher academic institutions in setting priorities, policies for governments, particularly small island developing states. The thinking that goes into this, innovative, looking at others, example from other countries and bringing into their economies, replicating it and adopting it to build their sustainable development priorities. These are the work that are done by mostly institutions of higher knowledge, such as the University Consortium. Now, your first question asked us to comment a bit. What do you think should be the focus of the renewal of this University Consortium? Look, for me, I leave the education aspect to those who do it better. But I would emphasize the strengthening of this consortium itself. Building it and expanding it should be a focus of this axis. We know that in the regions who are represented today, there are many new universities that have, and higher educations institutions that have grown or have been established in their constituency that have not been a formal player and formal part of this university consortium. If they could be roped in together with the traditional institution, perhaps taking lead, this would be a good step for the university consortium. Also, I am also aware that, and UNESCO could correct me, in as far as sustainable development priorities of small islands are concerned, the consortium is probably the only recognized higher education or educational organization, in fact, generally speaking, in all levels that exist. So very few of our citizens exist in the world of higher education. Their life is lived in the bottom part of education, in the secondary school, in the primary schools. And some people don't penetrate right up to the higher education where they benefit from the thinking and from the conversation that goes up here. So if that could trickle down, if the education thinking and if, for instance, the implementations of the Sustainable Development Goal, bulk of the implementation are done by citizens who not necessarily have higher education degrees and qualifications, but they have to know the role and they have to know what is required and they have to own it and earn it in their livelihoods. This is where the education systems in SIDS should be made aware. And this certain role of higher education in filtering this down to all the levels of education, including to the vocational level. So that's perhaps my contribution to that particular question. Now, what do you propose to be the most mechanism to mobilize the funds of access? You know, resource mobilization, I think these professors knows how to resource mobilize. But for me, in as far as the consortium is concerned, you need to have a strategy, an agreed strategy of mobilization of resources. And we have tasked, and we have given that responsibility to our colleagues from the University of Delaware. And it's just a matter of us to support that initiative, let them come up with a strategy of resource mobilization. Let's let the university members to have a look at it, and then decide whether that is the right approach. Then they go from there. This inclusive and this participatory resource mobilization, where everybody contributes to the thinking, and then go all in their separate way to try and resource mobilize. This could be, and maybe a way to go forward on this particular resource mobilization. So what are the recommended priorities that should be addressed by the Axis based on the gaps identified, and how can the renewal of the Axis contribute to the SIDS International Conference? These two issues are very important issues as well. There is a lot of gap, but I think what we are doing now and what UNESCO is doing, and I would encourage our colleagues from UNESCO to take a firm lead and continue to support this process and ensure that all the procedural requirement for registrations and for Axis is done within their system, because they are really under the United Nations systems, and how we are operating right now are the lead organization in this. Of course, for the fourth SIDS conference, we are particularly looking forward, and I've said this before in some of the conversation that we've undertaken, that we are really looking forward to the thought processes coming from the higher education sector of SIDS. And this is where we are really looking forward to the advice, direction of how the small island developing states can see the next 50 years, of course. We are all aware that both the Samoa pathway, particularly the Sustainable Development Goals, most, if not all, of the goals have ever been achieved by any one country. So we are really lagging behind, with COVID coming to interfere and all these crises that are going on. These are factors that will inhibit further the aspiration and the ability of small island states to go forward. And that is why the General Assembly has called for the fourth international conference. And one of the main purposes of the conference is to see the ability, ascertain the ability of small island developing states in achieving the 2030 agenda. So this is my contribution at this time, and I would like to again thank you for organizing this and inviting us to come and share a few thoughts with you this morning.
Thank you very much. It has been really enlightening to hear your thoughts. Do not worry. UNESCO will keep taking the lead as much as we can, as much resources permitting. And also thank you very much for sharing us these thoughts about the importance of the SIDS conference and the role that this project could play in that particular context. Thank you very much for that. Now, under normal circumstances, I would give the floor to Professor Khalim Shah, but I've been told that Professor Holland has also, some constraints and has to leave as well, right? So if you allow me, Khalim, if you don't mind, I would move yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. I mean, it looks like it's a mess, but we will be getting somewhere soon. So, Professor Holland, if you can share your thoughts with us, that would be really appreciated. Please, the floor is yours.
Nakavakalevu and Nisambulovinaka this morning. I just wish to say thank you to UNESCO for inviting me to participate, and thank you to Khalim for his graciousness in allowing me to step in front of him outside of Pacific Protocol. And I'm speaking as a very proud professor, because what you've just seen is the sort of thing that we all dream of, which is that our students go on to become leaders in transforming the world in their own way. And Sai Navoti is one of our alumni doing exactly that. And so it's always a pleasure to join in behind his leadership. And Axis, I think, is a reflection of the very foundation of our university, where the University of the South Pacific is 50 years old, and it is a meeting point for the Pacific nations, for all of its member countries, the 12 member countries, and the other Pacific nations that also send their students to the University of the South Pacific. And the University of West Indies was founded in this same mode. And we've demonstrated collectively how we can stand up for climate change, how we can stand up for the challenges of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. We've demonstrated the power of our collective voice as we're preparing for the United Nations Ocean Conference next month. And I think that we can't underestimate the power of this as we proceed with the many iterations that decolonization requires. And it's this collective, diverse approach that really is a testimony to the very high ranking in sort of as an academic these days, we're all asked by our vice chancellors to be concerned about our ranking. And the University of Malta and the University of West Indies have really demonstrated that capability. But that collective approach can be applied to things like joint degrees, the exchanges, the sort of summer school that Stefano suggested. They're having led long ago a NATO summer school that was transformational in preparing the research for the last few decades. I think that sort of Oxus summer school could lay the groundwork for preparing our leaders to be working together. And we see every UNFCCC negotiation, as we work within AOSIS, we see the power of this collective approach. At the G77, we see the power of the collective approach. So I really think it's our shared mission to deliver higher education and research. We have the founding values of our universities reflect that. And we have this really important opportunity to have the voices of some of the smaller nations of the world lead the way in preparing for resilience. And I say that as on my other screen, I have open a storm spinning up into a tropical cyclone threatening one of our islands. So I just say that in light of the very real challenges that we face. So Vnakavakalevu, and I appreciate the opportunity to join this very important conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Holland. I think that, we got the message about you're seeing also many opportunities in the possible Oxis summer school, and I think that this is a powerful message. And also, we heard loud and clear your claim that higher education and research should work for the benefit of resilience of our institutions as well. So that was very clear to me. Now, let's move back to the original order of speakers, and I'm going to give the floor now to Professor Kaleem Shah. Kaleem, the floor is finally yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesca. I appreciate that. So now I don't have much to say, given that I came after these colleagues. So I'm happy about that. But very nice to be here with everyone. Thanks to UNESCO for giving us this platform to have this discussion. So I think I want to sort of broaden what we think about when we talk about higher education institutions and SIDS. And Sai already alluded to that, so that we know that there are numerous challenges, including resource capacities, institutional capacities, and so on. But what we really want to get at is to place higher education institutions and SIDS in that context of sustainable development in a broader sense. And along with that, the contributions of higher education to the Samoa Pathway objectives and goals, and those sorts of national sort of development challenges that we have. What is the role of higher education institutions today and moving into the future with regards to sustainable development? and we know that we have very similar challenges sometimes to other parts of the world, in Africa and Asia and so on. But of course, as the speakers have said, SIDS have some very unique context that brings along some rather interesting situations, challenges, that we do need a united front, so to speak, a consortium, to assist in coordination of finding solutions to these kinds of more unique SIDS-based challenges. One of the other points that was made is that the SIDS consortium now, as we look at it today, necessarily has to look very different from the SIDS consortium as envisioned in the past, namely because we have a number of, multiplicity of types of higher education and research institutions in SIDS now, national focused, regional focused, private institutions, technical, vocational institutions, so on and so forth. And in addition to that, we have significant networks of what I would call diaspora institutions or resources of our own island diaspora in multiple parts of the world that we should be able to draw upon in sort of this new reflection of what a consortium can look like. And in this context of sustainable development and the place of higher education, we have to look at what the mandates of our institutions are. We know that different institutions have, national or even regional, like the UWI, regional sorts of mandates. And typically, as was said, we have the mandates of human resource development. And that human resource development, skills, training, knowledge, dissemination, and so on, has to be aligned with the sustainable development goals nationally, regionally, internationally. We also have the research aspect, and we know that we have institutional capacity, physical capacity, financial capacity, boundaries or limitations on research. But what we really need to look at is leveraging our indigenous resources, aspects of our indigenous cultures and resources to bring that forth in the research that we develop. And the third piece, I think, the third arm of what we're looking at is sort of that societal engagement of higher education. What are the avenues through which we make our voices heard, make the institution's voices heard in these national level discussions, but also international level discussions? And I think with that is where the consortium, the value of the consortium lies in being this, as Professor Holland mentioned, this sort of uniting voice, this uniting platform, where we understand, we know that we have regional institutions, regional bodies that have been doing quite well. But beyond that, the uniqueness of regions, I think there are several common challenges or common threads that a consortium can provide a coordinating mechanism, an alignment mechanism, to be a platform in these policy discussions about higher education at the international forums. Some of the, I think, key challenges that maybe are broader that we can think about moving forward are, for example, we all have, some of these common threads. We all have this issue of what I call brain drain, right? So the training of those human resources through our institutions but then young people leave our shores, and we might lose that investment that we made in those resources. I think that's something that's very common across all of our SIDS. So what are the pipelines that we have? How can HEIs facilitate pipelines to ensure that we're not just training the new generation, but we have them delivering on sustainable development objectives in islands? Other things that come up, the bridging this technology divide between North and South is a significant challenge that we all can come together to look at. We know that we lack the technology infrastructure in many cases, but this is something that we can take up at the international level through a consortium. Related to that, intellectual property rights, which we know has been a challenge for a long time. So just pointing out some of the commonalities that I think a consortium platform can deal with or help coordinate and manage at that international policy level, which is something, I'm just going to throw that into the mix with points that these colleagues have made already. And lastly, on this point about resource mobilization, I think, of course, that's a very a significant point. One of the ideas I'd like to put forth to this forum here is, for example, I think that there's no reason why our AOSIS group, the consortium should be viewed as a resource that our AOSIS colleagues can tap into as a matter of technical advisory, technical support, research support for many of the important questions, challenges, and obligations of the AOSIS group. And in that way, we can probably add value in very specific and focused ways to the negotiations from a technical aspect, a research aspect. And I think in that vein, there may be some to show value and then leverage that kind of value added to mobilize some resources. Of course, just an idea along with the others that colleagues have mentioned. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kalim. Very interesting. I think that I will take probably 3 ideas. There were many, but let me just pick some. One is the need for considering that sustainable development has the potential of helping us to align the efforts of SIDS in this particular project in the area of higher education and research. I think that was a very powerful message. Second, that the UCSIS can work really as a platform of for providing a united voice that deals with the many challenges that our societies, our economies, our environment are facing, right? So I think that that's really something that is somehow connected to the very last point, which is if we are capable of having UCSIS really addressing those challenges by way of teaching and doing research, certainly there will be opportunities for resource mobilization, because people will find, including our own governments, will find in UCSIS an added value, because they are going to provide, they are going to look at UCSIS as a solution provider that in the process of generating that solution is in itself adding value to the whole set of countries. So these would be my takeaways, but there were many ideas really useful. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to move to another a radically different place, and I'm going to give the floor to Professor David Smith, who has been passionately waiting until the very end, So thank you very much. Please, Professor Smith, the floor is yours. I'm really eager to hear what you have to share with us. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you to UNESCO for inviting me. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on the sort of three main questions, and we started out by considering what are the main challenges to tertiary education or higher education in SIDS from my perspective. And I think part of it has to do with cost, and Kalim touched on it in one way. The dilemma that a government might have when it starts to train people and create highly skilled citizens who then leave that country and go off to work somewhere else. So we see that, for example, in a debate in Jamaica about should we be training people to become nurses, because the nurses then they just go off to America or they go to Britain, and is that a lost investment? It's something that we as small island states have to wrestle with because we are small economies and narrow economies. And also that we're trying to broaden our economies beyond simply depending on natural resources and depending more and more on human resources. So we have to build those human resources. And yes, sometimes when we build those human resources, individuals may leave, and large numbers of those individuals may in fact go to other countries. I think what we have to understand is that the solution to that is not do not educate these people because they'll leave, but it's educate as many people as possible and come up with government policies and ways of capturing that human capital and using it to help build small island developing states' economy. I don't think that we can achieve the sustainable development goals in small island developing states without massive investments in building human capital. But I think also one of the things that can be an aid in terms of whether it be UCSIS or UNESCO or UNDP or UNDESA is to work with governments to help them to put into place good policies that will take advantage of building human capital and help them to understand how that will broaden the economy and make it more resilient and more powerful, and move us out of, for example, where in the Caribbean we have some of the most tourism-dependent economies in the world. Not the problem that tourism is a problem, but being highly dependent on a single sector is a problem for a small state, and we need to go beyond that. So how can international cooperation help? We definitely need the UN to be able to provide us with good examples as how broadening the economy can actually work. And within SIDS institutions, I think providing ways in which we can make education more flexible and more accessible so that people don't necessarily think, well, I can't afford a first degree, and they maybe not, but maybe they can afford a course which builds up their skills and makes them a bit more marketable. And we need, I think, among the institutions, the educational institutions, to work among ourselves to come up with more flexible approaches to providing education at the higher education level, to be able to help people to get more qualifications that they may need, and possibly to break away from the degree, the first degree, the second degree, and possibly third degree model, and find ways of being able to meet our customers' needs that aren't necessarily all tied to a 3 or 4 year degree, but can still provide high quality education. The last thing, what would be an important asset or a project that UCSIS could bring? If we can find a couple of very good, well-funded research projects that are tied to sustainable development goals and achieving sustainable development goals that allow small states to achieve those goals, I think that would be extremely important. I think we still have a tendency sometimes, even though it's not true, that we tend to sometimes think that sometimes research is a theoretical thing. and don't always recognize that it can be extremely well grounded in meeting development goals, improving human well-being. And I think if we can find ways of funding joint research among the universities within the consortium to meet maybe 1 or 2 sustainable development goals, using that multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches that are going to be vital for meeting those goals, I think we will have done well. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Smith. Very clear. I think that you really help us to understand that SIDS countries should commit themselves to educate as many people as possible, leaving aside the fear that some of them may leave. Because as you already said, it is also the responsibility of governments to generate the appropriate policy environment for these human resources to flourish, so to say. So, I mean, you can educate people and they're going to leave if they don't find opportunities in the country. And I think that creating those opportunities is partly, it's not only, but partly at least, the responsibility of generating a prone policy environment. You also made a good point, I thought, about the need, I would put that in my words, of breaking the mold, so to say, and trying to see if we can break the dependencies. And you made the point about tourism, you know, being the only industry, so to say, in a few countries. So I think that this idea of struggling with dependencies and generating a more, I would say, diverse economic environment, I thought it was also very powerful. You also mentioned that the response from higher education should go to meet the needs in generating more flexible approaches to the provision of higher education. And you mentioned certainly that, you know, the traditional approach might not be suited to the demands or even the possibilities of people living in SIDS. And finally, I thought that the brilliant idea of trying to see if we can identify a few, not necessarily many, but a few research projects that address, from the perspective of SIDS, the SDGs. I mean, from a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary perspective, that could be really an asset for this project. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed, you know, as you can see, there are many takeaways from my side. Look, colleagues, time flies as usual, and I wonder if my colleague Miguel, Sai, Kalim would like to add some more reflections or points or reactions to what has already been said. I mean, if you don't mind, I'm going to offer first the floor to Miguel, and then Sai, and then Kalim, and finally, last but not least, to Professor Smith again. Miguel?
Thank you very much, Francesc, and all the panelists, but also to everyone that is following us on this occasion. At this stage, I think that well, it is clear the importance of the consortium and of collaborative efforts in higher education, particularly in the context of the SIDS. And I think I would be very brief just to highlight our gratitude to those that are joining forces on this occasion to make the consortium move ahead on its scope. Maybe just to highlight that it is in periods like the ones that we are going through, and I mean with the pandemic, with the economic and social challenges, that the relevance of these efforts actually become even more evident, more clear, since the solutions to these challenges is first and foremost in knowledge, on personal capacities, but also in which the institutional capacities are ultimately based. So I think we have here also almost the obligation now towards ourselves and our brothers and sisters to try really to join synergies and finding well, a way through that benefits all of us. So I think it's more in these generic lines that I would like to express myself. by also thanking again you, Pedro, Francesc, but also the other panelists that join us today.
Thank you, Miguel. Very clear to me. Thank you very much for your support. Now let's move to Sai. Sai, would you like to share with us some thoughts or reactions to what has been said until now?
Thank you very much. Look, there is absolutely full support to all the contribution and the points that were made by the panelists this morning. We really appreciated very much to hear this encouraging contribution. And I hope, well, our role really, as you know, from DESA, is to monitor the implementation of the Samoa pathway. This is one aspect of the Samoa pathway that needs to be strengthened in order to fully support the effort of small island developing states in their capacity to meet the priorities and targets that they have set for themselves. This conversation is, in small measures or in large measures, is contributing towards that, and we are fully supportive. I just want to reiterate the full support of the SEEDS unit and the Division for Sustainable Development Goals, and of course the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in supporting this initiative. We are looking forward to traveling this road at least this year and next, and the following year with you, and hopefully that at the end of it, we will see a very successful fourth SEEDS conference. That's all the contribution I can say as a comment before we part. Thank you very much indeed once again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Professor Kalimcha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francis. So I actually want to harken back to just two points. One is where we are right now with this revitalization of the consortium. As was mentioned, we are now at the stage of developing our new strategic framework, with the which my shop at the University of Delaware is leading in conjunction and close collaboration with UNESCO, the other UN colleagues, and the consortium, original consortium members. So that's really sort of the practicality of the next step. Moving forward from there, we would want to leverage this strategy to build out this membership of the consortium beyond the original members, and including new or other types of higher education and research institutions, as well as those diaspora organizations around the world. So you know, practically that is where we are to update colleagues, and we hope to move that process forward as quickly as possible. And the second point I wanted to pick up on was actually on the excellent idea from Professor Smith about a couple of projects. I would suggest what we need to look at is one flagship type project, one signature project that brings together the consortium and our objectives in a very coherent ways. Maybe a multi-dimensional, multi-level type of project that would showcase the value that the UCSIS can bring, and showcase that in the context of the SDGs, showcase it in the context of a national, as we were saying, to showcase the worth, the value added of the consortium at the national governments, and also to present some kinds of tangible value added outcomes in preparation for the 2024 SIDS conference. I think that would be an excellent opportunity to present the value here at the 2024 conference. So in so doing, a sort of a flagship signature project would bring together multiple consortium members, pull together expertise, pull together training of students, and other resources to really show some outcomes at that point. So I want to suggest to colleagues that we think about how we do that and ensure that a flagship project of that nature clearly aligns with the goals, the SDG goals and the Samoa pathway, and possibly include that in the strategic framework we're working on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kalima. That was very clear and I think very supportive, among other things, not only of the ongoing work, but also of the idea that Professor Smith already shared with us. I like also the term flagship or signature project, which I think helps also to focus the energy in maybe one or two areas simply, but really putting a lot of effort on those. Professor Smith, once again, thank you very much for sharing with us this proposal, which I think is gaining ground among us. Now, the floor is yours in case you wanted to add some more thoughts or simply elaborate a bit more on these ideas.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that we should also remember to tap into the expertise which we have already. For example, the University of South Pacific has a long history and a very good level of expertise in distance teaching out of the necessity of course, the geography of the Pacific, and we should be taking advantage of the knowledge that we have. I particularly like the point that Kalim just raised with the idea of a flagship project. I think that would work very well. So I look forward to discussing with him and having further dialogue among us as to what that project might look like and how it could be funded. I think that would be absolutely excellent. Tying it to the Sustainable Development Goals and being able to show governments how you can build resilience, how you can build human capital, how you can broaden economies and make them more resilient, I think is going to be a very good idea, and particularly if we can come up with some well-worked examples that are practical that can be rolled out in many small states, that would be excellent. So I really am looking forward to working with Prof. Shah on this and having discussions on how we can actually put that into place and get something that we can present at the next conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Smith. I haven't seen any questions or comments by participants so far. So I think that with this, and in the interest of time, because there are other sessions piling just behind this one, so I'm going to conclude the session at this point, just making sure that the participants, the rest of virtual participants, get a clear message about we are really committed. UNESCO, UNDESA, and all the founding partners are committed, and we are going to make it happen. Okay, I think that Professor Shah already mentioned the preparation of a strategic framework, the need for us to leverage the process of building membership, and I think that now we also, in a way, as we say in my own language, we walk because we started walking along the way. So, I think that this idea of maybe identifying a possible flagship project could be in itself the detonant of this project. So with that, once again, reiterating our, and I think I'm talking also on behalf of Miguel Doria as well, reiterating UNESCO's commitment, and expressing our gratitude for sharing your time, your ideas with the rest of participants at this magnificent World Higher Education Conference. With that, I look forward to meeting you soon. Who knows, maybe in person as well. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.